Hi everyone, welcome back to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith. In this video, we're going to continue learning XCOM, the board game designed by Eric Lang and published by Fantasy Flight Games. If you missed it, we released a previous video where we went over the rules for the timed phase, and I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. And now we're going to learn the final part, the resolution phase. So let's go back to the application and see what we have to do first. Unlike the timed phase, where the steps are somewhat randomized, the resolution phase follows essentially the same steps in the same order each time. We're going to tap Proceed here. Here we're being told that the commander needs to audit the budget, and there's some text on screen as well to help remind you about what to do during this step. But let's go back to the board and I'll just explain it to you now. First, the players should count up their expenses, which are the total number of satellites, soldiers, scientists, and interceptors assigned everywhere on the board except here in the recruitment pool. As we saw in the last video, a soldier could have been assigned to officer training in order to make it elite. This soldier is sitting on an asset. It's not on the board, so it does not count towards the expenses for this round. Counting these up quickly, we have 3 soldiers in the base, 3 on the mission. We have 4 scientists assigned to researching technology. We have 4 interceptors and 1 satellite in orbit, which equals 15 credits. Here are all the credits the commander had, which came from the initial budget plus those from emergency funding. Thankfully, there were 16, so we'll remove these 15 back to the general supply. For now, hang on to any remaining credits in your budget. If you ever spend more money than you had credits, then you ran a negative budget, and you take that negative value and move the most panicked continent on the panic track, that number of spaces to the right. So let's say we'd overspent our budget by 3. In that case, we would take Australia, the most panicked continent so far, and move it up 3 spaces. If 2 continents are tied, then the players just decide which of the continents they want to move up. Continents that have already fallen into panic, that's the term for reaching this level on the panic track, are not counted. So let's say, for example, we'd overspent by 3, and the continents were like this. We'd first advance Australia by 1, and then with the remaining 2, we would advance South America. Thankfully, we were within our budget, so let me just put this right back to where it was. With the audit of the budget complete, we'll tap Next. And now the commander is told that they can recruit soldiers and build interceptors. Each will cost 1 credit and must come from the recruitment area here, and these are a limited supply, so if a model is not in this location, then it can't be recruited or built. That said, destroyed interceptors and killed soldiers will come back to this recruitment pool where they can be collected again. And since unspent credits go back to the general supply, and we have 1 credit left, we may as well spend it, and the players have decided that the commander should grab this assault soldier. So this will be placed on the appropriate reserve. If we had picked up an interceptor, it would go to the commander's reserve for interceptors. At this point, any remaining credits should now be returned to the general supply. Moving on to the next step, the commander is told to resolve the crises. This is done by revealing and resolving 1 at a time from the top of this pile of cards that were created by the commander. Now in this round, we only had 1 crisis, but it's possible during a round to have several that you need to resolve. In this case, we're told to kill 2 soldiers. When you're told to kill a soldier, it can come from anywhere except the recruitment pool. So it could be soldiers on the board, in the reserves, or assigned to an asset. In this case, we'll kill these 2 soldiers, returning them to the recruitment pool. Out of interest, let me show you this asset that the squad leader has. During the timed phase, they can place 2 of their soldiers here in order to remove one of the crisis cards chosen during the round. So after making their choice, the commander could have informed the squad leader of the threat that was looming, and then during the timed phase, the squad leader could have put 2 of their soldiers on this card, and then that crisis would have been removed. Either way, 2 soldiers are being used up, but these soldiers won't die. They'll go back to the reserve at the end of the round. So that's just one way in which the players can work together to manage the threats that they're facing. After a crisis is resolved, place it in the discard pile and then draw and resolve the next one, if any. Now, a number of the activities in this resolution phase are going to be referred to as tasks, and they're all handled in a very similar way. So let's take a moment and see how that works. You resolve tasks using the dice. There are 4 blue XCOM dice, and there's 1 red enemy die. You always roll the enemy die, and along with it, a certain number of XCOM dice, usually equal to the number of units you've assigned to a task. Each XCOM die has two sides that show successes, and the rest are blank. Successes you roll give you a benefit based on the task. Blank sides do nothing. Now, whenever you start a new task, ensure that the threat level is set to 1 on the board. After rolling the dice, if the enemy die value is equal to or less than the threat level currently on the board, the roll is considered a loss and the task is ended. You still gain any successes you rolled on your XCOM dice, and these come in the form of success tokens. But all units assigned to a lost task are then exhausted or destroyed. As in this case, if you haven't rolled a loss, you gain the successes on your XCOM die and may choose to roll the dice again to accumulate more successes. However, each time you make additional rolls on the same task, increase the threat level by 1, increasing the odds that you'll now roll a loss. This means on your 5th attempt of the same task, the threat level will be on the 5. And you may keep making additional rolls, but the threat will simply stay at the 5 level. Remember, anytime you start a new task, the threat level on the board is reset to 1. Also, you're not limited to the number of dice included in the game. If a task would let you roll 6 XCOM dice, you would roll these 4 and then re-roll 2 of the others and add up the results. Some assets in particular will allow you to roll additional dice, but you don't get this benefit unless you are already rolling at least 1 die from a unit you have committed to the task. You can stop attempting a task at any point, even before you begin, but particularly when you see that threat level increasing, you may decide it's not worth it. Now, leaving a task incomplete will likely have some consequences, but perhaps you'd like to face those consequences instead of losing soldiers or potentially exhausting your units, and we'll see how that works in just a moment. But for now, let's go back to the application and see what the next step of the resolution phase is. All right, next we see it's time to resolve research, and this is going to involve those tasks that we were just talking about. This step is actually 3 separate tasks, one for each piece of technology you want to research. And you always begin here at position 1 and then go in this direction. And because they're all separate tasks, once you finish attempting one and move to the next, ensure you reset the threat level back to position 1. Starting with this piece of technology, I've assigned 2 scientists. So I'll be rolling 2 of the XCOM dice and the enemy die. Let's see what I get. For each success that I roll, like this one here, I'll place a success token on the technology. I'll also check what I rolled on the enemy die. This is an 8, which is certainly not equal to or less than the threat level, so I didn't roll a loss. Before we continue with this task, let me first explain exactly what we're trying to accomplish. Here's the Firestorm technology that I was working on and the success token that I received. Once there are success tokens on the technology equal to or greater than this value in the top left-hand corner, the technology is considered researched and then given to the player with the role that's listed here, in this case, the commander. Researched technology can then be used right away as soon as the situation applies. In this case, we see this is a resolution phase asset, so it could be used during this resolution phase. Now, because I didn't roll a loss and the task isn't completed, I can choose to roll again, but first I need to increase the threat level by 1. When I'm playing, I usually have one of the other players who's not actively rolling the dice control the threat level. Let's see if I can get one more success. And look, there it is. So I got the success I needed. And even if I had rolled a 1 or a 2 on the enemy die, I would still get to collect this success. So then this technology would be given to the commander and they could use it right away. If you do roll a loss, and only if you roll a loss, you then flip over all of the scientists assigned to that task. This side shows they're exhausted. However, in this case, I didn't roll a loss, so I will unexhaust these. But whether exhausted or not after finishing a task, they still stay here on the board. Now the chief scientist would proceed to the next piece of technology, and this time only 1 scientist was assigned, so only 1 of the blue XCOM dice would be rolled along with the enemy die, and the threat level would be reset to 1. I'm not going to roll dice for these technologies. You now understand how they work, but let's just say that I failed on both of these. Not only did I not accomplish the task, I also rolled a loss, and so now I have 2 exhausted scientists, one on each of these 2 tasks. All right, with the research resolved, we'll hit next. And now the central officer has to resolve orbital defense. Very simply, the player rolls 1 XCOM die for each satellite deployed to the orbit location, along with the enemy die. For every success you roll, you destroy a UFO, returning it to the supply. This was a terrible roll. Not only did I fail to roll a success, I also rolled a 1, which is equal to or less than the current threat level, and that means I've rolled a loss. In which case, all of the satellites assigned to orbit are exhausted and flipped over. Once the task is complete, in this case unsuccessfully, for each UFO still in orbit, move the lowest continent on the panic track up by 1. If there's a tie for lowest continents, the commander chooses which one to increase. Let's say for a moment there had actually been 2 other UFOs in orbit. Well, we already resolved this one. And so for the second one, the commander would choose one of these continents, perhaps Africa, to advance 1 space further. And then for the final UFO, would again have to break the tie on this level, maybe moving Europe up by 1. Thankfully, that was not the case though, so I will just quickly reset these continents and take these 2 UFOs off the board. Moving along, the application is now telling the commander it's time to resolve global defenses. In the order of their choosing, the commander will resolve 1 continent at a time where UFOs and interceptors are located. In this case, we have some in North America and in Europe. Let's say the commander chose Europe first. For each interceptor at the location, roll an XCOM die, and as always, roll the enemy die. Let's see how I do here. Okay, I rolled a success, and for each success rolled, destroy a UFO and return it to the supply. There's still UFOs here, and I want to keep rolling, so I'm going to increase the threat level by 1, and then I'll roll again. Another success, so I'll remove another UFO, increase the threat level, and I will choose to roll again. And look at that, I just made it 1 more success. We'll destroy this UFO. Now, let's say I had rolled a 3 on the enemy die, which would be equal to or less than the current threat level. I would still gain my success as usual, but when you roll a loss, you destroy all of the interceptors that were assigned to the task. These would then be placed in the recruitment pool. However, in this case, I was successful and I didn't roll a loss, so I'll put the interceptors back here for now. Then you would move on to the next continent, and each continent is considered its own task, so you would reset the threat level to 1. Let's say at this continent I was less successful and a UFO remained and both of these interceptors were destroyed. You then increase the panic level of each continent where UFOs remain by 1 for each UFO that's located there. So in this case, North America's panic level would increase by 1, which we would immediately adjust on the panic track, like so. We see that the next step is for the squad leader to resolve the base defense. The player may now attack each enemy found in the base in the order of their choosing. However, unlike other tasks, you do not reset the threat level with each enemy. So if you were to do a couple of rolls against this muton and then move on to the floater, the threat level would be at 3. To attack enemies, you first assign soldiers to them. To make this easier for you to follow, let me move our soldiers off of the board along with our enemies, and I'll show you this close up. So here are the 3 soldiers assigned to defend the base. They're matching reserves and the 2 invading aliens, and the squad leader has chosen to attack the floater first. For each symbol you find on an alien, you may assign 1 soldier that shares that symbol on their reserve card. So if we were attacking this muton, you'd actually be able to assign up to 3 different soldiers. You'll notice that some of the symbols have a little yellow highlight around them. You can ignore that for the purposes of matching up icons, although it will have an effect later. So we will assign this assault soldier to the floater's icon here because they match, and we'll assign the support who has this symbol that matches the one found here. For each assigned soldier, you get to roll an XCOM die and, as always, the enemy die. You should also check the card text of the enemy in case that has an effect on the battle as well. For example, this floater says that we cannot roll an attack against it more than once each round. So if we don't succeed on the first roll, we won't be able to defeat it. All right, let's see how I do. Okay, not bad. I rolled a success. For each success you roll, place a success token on that enemy, and as soon as the number of success tokens matches the number here in the top right-hand corner, you've defeated that enemy. You then flip this enemy over and give it to the scientist, and it becomes salvage for them, which they can often use with their assets. If you roll a loss when attacking an enemy, then the soldiers assigned to that task are killed and return to the recruitment pool. Otherwise, if they survive, they can be assigned to another task, in this case, the remaining enemy. In the previous video, we showed you how a soldier can become elite. When you assign an elite soldier to fight an enemy, they will give you 2 XCOM dice for your pool. So in fighting the Muton, we could put this assault elite soldier on this symbol, our regular assault here, and then our sniper could go with this symbol. We'd then be able to roll 4 XCOM dice. 1 for the sniper, 1 for the assault, and 2 for the elite. But remember, when rolling to attack enemies in your base, you do not reset the threat level even when you finish defeating an enemy. So going against the Muton, our threat level would already be at 2. Let's see how I do this time. Well, not too bad at all. I've rolled 3 successes and my enemy die is higher than the current threat level. So this enemy is also defeated, flipped over, and given to the chief scientist as salvage. Before we move on, let's quickly look at this example enemy because it does have the yellow highlights around its symbol. Now, as usual, you can assign a soldier to that enemy with that symbol whether they have the highlights on their reserve card or not. But in the event that you do assign a soldier that also has the matching highlights, let's say this assault, they will then provide 2 XCOM dice. This is an enemy they are specially equipped to deal with. Moreover, if you assign an elite unit with that matching specialty, they will get the additional die for being elite, plus the additional die for being specialized. So even though in this case we might only be assigning 2 soldiers, we're actually rolling 4 XCOM dice. 1 for the support unit, and 3 for the specialized elite assault unit. Unlike other tasks, when you roll a loss while fighting enemies in the base, you kill the affected soldiers, but if you have any remaining soldiers still assigned to the base and they have symbols that could match the enemies still there, you can continue using them to fight the enemies. Only once all of your soldiers are dead at the base, or perhaps no longer have symbols that match the enemies, are you forced to stop that task. The squad leader also has some flexibility. You could start attacking one enemy and then decide partway through, I'm going to start attacking a different enemy instead, and then go back to the previous enemy, and so on. Just remember, each time you roll the dice, the threat level is going up by 1 and it doesn't reset. Now, we succeeded in defeating the enemies in the base, but if we hadn't, for each enemy left behind, you would discard it and then increase the damage to the base by 1. If the damage marker ever hits one of these spaces that show the red symbol, then you need to refer to the invasion plan. And then the effect listed with this matching red symbol would resolve. In this case, each continent's panic level would increase by 1. Also, if the damage marker advances to the final orange space, the base has been overrun and the players lose the game. For this purpose, after resolving the base defense and hitting next, the application will ask us, was the XCOM base destroyed? If we say it was, then the game ends immediately and we lose. But it wasn't destroyed, so we'll say, not destroyed, and tap next. Now the squad leader resolves the mission. Again, to make things a little clearer, I've taken the mission off of the board and placed it here with the assigned soldiers and their matching reserves. Each mission has 3 separate tasks that are resolved from left to right. And once again, you do not reset the threat level between rolls you make for these tasks. When fighting an enemy on the mission, you do it the exact same way you would when fighting an enemy in the base. And defeated enemies go as salvage to the chief scientist. If the task shows just symbols, assign soldiers to them just like they're assigned to an enemy. one per matching symbol. In the case of this first one, we have that yellow highlight around the icon again. So I could use a support unit because it has the matching icon, even though it doesn't have the highlight, and it would provide one XCOM die. Or I could use the sniper, who also shows the yellow highlight, and then it would provide 2 XCOM dice when trying to complete that task. Let's see how I do. All right, I got a success. These non-enemy tasks only require 1 success to complete them, so place a success token there as a reminder that they're done. Rolling a loss on a mission will kill any soldiers assigned to the specific task you were rolling for, sending them back to the recruitment pool. But even if you roll a loss, you may continue assigning soldiers you have remaining on the mission to any unfinished tasks. If you were successful, as we were here, you can also assign already used soldiers to new tasks within the mission. But the squad leader can also choose to quit the mission at any time. There's no penalty for this, enemies here do not affect the base, and in a future round, you'll be able to attempt any incomplete parts of the mission once again. If you do complete the mission, then take any of the soldiers assigned to it and place them back on their reserves, and then collect the 2 rewards listed in the top right-hand corner. In this example, let's say that the squad leader was successful in completing the first 2 tasks, but then noticed that the threat level was up to 4 and didn't want to risk losing any soldiers, so decided to stop there. Hitting next in the application, we're now told to update the continent panic levels. And you do this by looking on the game board and seeing what colored spaces each continent is currently sitting on. And then within the application, you drag those continents so that they match the same colors. Now, in this case, they're still all on the yellow spaces, so I'll put things back to the way they were. If the final mission had been unlocked during the timed phase, then the application would now ask you to resolve that mission. And you would do it the same way you resolve a regular mission, by placing your soldiers on the various tasks and trying to complete them. Although on the invasion plan, the missions are typically quite a bit harder and have some additional text rules that you need to follow. Now in the application, you need to tell it whether or not you completed the regular mission this round. In this case, we didn't, so we'll tap Not Completed. If the final mission had been unlocked, then the application would also ask us if that had been completed. And if the answer was yes, the players would win the game. Otherwise, we're being told to refresh units and cards. I should also remind you that players who have resolution phase assets can use them at any time. For example, during the resolution phase, if you've just rolled a loss and you're about to lose 3 of your soldiers, the central officer could use the satellite uplink, which is a resolution phase asset, exhaust it, and allow that player to re-roll the enemy die. But now we're being told to refresh our assets, and you do this by turning them upright. And you also get to refresh any tokens that are exhausted in their reserve. Now this is very important. We have an exhausted scientist here, but it's on the board, so we don't refresh it. However, an exhausted scientist in the reserve here would now be flipped over to its refreshed side. All discarded cards are now also put on the bottom of their respective decks. Next, we're being told to return units to the reserves. Satellites and scientists will return to their reserves exactly in the state that they were in, so you have to be careful. Don't flip them over. If the scientists are exhausted, they go to the reserves exhausted. And that means in the following round, they will not be able to be assigned to these research tasks. Tokens on assets are also returned to the reserves, including soldiers like this one that was turned into an elite soldier. These will go on to their matching reserve cards, except for soldiers that are on missions, either the regular missions or final missions. They stay there until either the mission is completed or replaced. Keep in mind, at most, you can have 4 soldiers on a single mission. So we have 3 soldiers here, and in the next timed phase, when told to add soldiers to a mission, we'd be only at most able to add 1 more. Interceptors on the board are also returned to their reserve. Hitting next, we now have to tell the application how many UFOs are in orbit, and currently there is 1. At the beginning of the next timed phase, you'll be instructed to move UFOs in orbit out to specified continents. UFOs in orbit will also reduce your effectiveness in the timed phase, as the application will give you actions out of order. Perhaps you will need to deploy your interceptors earlier on in the phase before you've really seen where the UFOs are going to end up. And this represents your communications being affected by those UFOs in orbit. For now, we'll tap next, and the resolution phase is completed. You're now ready to begin a new round. And so you will play round after round until either two of the continents reach the highest space on the panic track, or the base reaches the highest point of damage, in which case you lose, or once the players complete the final mission and then you win. And that's how you play XCOM the board game. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.